speaker is Birgitte Rønning. She's associate professor in comparative literature at the University of Oslo in Norway, and her fields of research are modernism, historical novel, robinsonades, women's literary history, feminist literary theory, gender and aesthetics, examples, and epistemology of exemplarity and book history. She was part of the COAST project connected to Women Writers Network, and so she was, called warriors there at that project. And also about her database on female robinsonades has been part of COBWEB project together with Kniženstvo and 3 other European projects. And Birgitte has published widely. She has published on gender negotiation, studies in visual arts, film and literature, power of the example, gender representation and authority from antiquity to present, do humanities and introduction, gender of modernism, and she has also published a lot on, especially on female robinsonades, and this is the subject of her today's talk. She has also, as I understood, made practically by herself the database with the help of IT the experts. Of course, we always need IT experts, but it seems to be your idea to make a database on female robinsonades. And you can find a link to that database at our website, Kniženstvo, where the links are. There's a link, so you can just press it and see it. So please proceed.
Thank you very much for your kind presentation and for me being invited to come to, or having been able to come to take part of this conference. And to Biljana for making this panel on digital humanities. And I'm just as Biljana, not an expert in digital humanities, but I have started and went into it and tried to see what use we can find in it for our literary research projects. So my topic is female robinsonades, and I will present my aims and reflections in making this online bibliography on this somewhat obscure genre. And I think I will start with definitions. Yes. A robinsonade is a survival story of on a more or less desert island, usually after a shipwreck, and it's modeled on Defoe's Robinson Crusoe from 1719. A female robinsonade, in my definition, is a robinsonade either written by a female author or telling the story of a female castaway, or both. In both cases, the master narrative, which generates all the others, is Defoe's novel. It tells, as we all know, the story of Robinson Crusoe, who defies his father's will and goes to sea, gets shipwrecked off South America, and spends 28 years on a desert island. The first 25 years entirely alone, and then thereafter in the company of the native he calls Friday. Defoe's novel depicts how Robinson, in his loneliness, manages to gain control over the island, himself, and his relationship to God, as well as how he performs all the activities necessary to survive: hunting and fishing, building a house, making pottery and clothes, farming, baking bread, etc., and making the calendar. In the course of the 18th century, numerous robinsonades appeared with this fixed set of elements of intrigue, connected to shipwreck, distress, and survival, but within a variety of discourses, styles, and with different themes. After Defoe, the genre came to include everything from picaresque stories of sea travels to sentimental, even erotic love dramas, and the desert island offers the opportunity to cast culturally critical views back on the country of origin, as well as utopian or colonialist narratives of new societies being formed. And Schnabel, the one at the bottom here, that is from 1731. A German robinsonade being the first to use the word robinsonade in the preface, and it is a utopian vision of a whole settlement, German settlement on an island. The one on top to the right is Robinson den Jüngre. That was Compass, German pedagogues, adaptation of Robinson Crusoe for children. And I think those three are what sets the genre together with Robinson Crusoe in the 18th century. Then there is an expansion towards a family children's story with Johann His The Swiss Family Robinson, which came out in Germany in 1812. There is Jules Verne's L'Île Mystérieuse from 1874, which introduced technological, nearly science fiction approach to the desert island topics. And Lord of the Flies, I also included, making the dystopian vision of society's breakdown from the middle of the 20th century. Very often, if you trace this story of the Robinsonade, you will also end up with Tournier from the 1970s, Vendredi ou le Pacifique, and of course Coetzee Foe. In 1762, Rousseau declared in Emile that the only book his young pupils should read was Robinson Crusoe. And I think that is why that is mentioned in the preface by Campe, and is the reason why Robinson Crusoe turns out to be a work of juvenile fiction. This, shown this way, there is a line of heritage that is definitely male, and it is usually described in gendered masculine terms. This is the story of a male hero's fight for survival in a nature which at first sight seems hostile, but which can be mastered, and which is instructive for young boys particularly. The Robinsonade scholar Martin Green in 1990 is, however, the first to make masculinity an explicit part of the genre. According to Green, even though both Defoe and Rousseau were good portrayers of women, in survival adventure they either omitted women or allotted them subordinate roles. And to Green, this is due to the gender bias inherent in Enlightenment ideology in which the Robinsonade took form. In the Enlightenment as a whole, the liberation of men entailed the limitation of women, he says. This new masculinism was not a result of indifference to women, nor was it a calculated exploitation. It seems simply to be the dark or shadow side of a gender myth, the founding myth of both adventure and enlightenment, which summoned men to stand together against all their enemies, feudal tyrants, false priests, tax farmers, and spoke of lordship of the women and children as the natural reward. Men were to be the sturdy yeoman class of the human race, each with his little kingdom of home behind him, including his consort and his subjects. However, the Robinsonade is not that exclusively male or masculine. Women Women have at all times also read, written, and been protagonists in castaway stories, although in a modest number of works. The scholar who first coined the term female Robinsonade was the American Germanist Janine Blackwell in a seminal article from 1985. She had counted 26 female Robinsonades in German, Dutch, English, French, and American literature until the beginning of the 19th century. And inspired by Blackwell, I have searched for more texts, and so far I have documented 91 Robinsonades with female author and or a female protagonist from the period from 1719 to 1900. And here is just a few examples of them. The first one, upper to the left, that is also a German one, being more utopian, from the 18th century. There are two in the genre of sentimental novel, Zélie dans le désert, and Tales of Fancy from just before and just after 1800, French and English. And there is, at the bottom line, there are Robinsonades written with female, with girl Robinsons, especially for a young readership then. So it's just it is exactly the same change to juvenile fiction within the female Robinsonade corpus as within the genre. The difference between the former slide and this one is that these works do not constitute a line of heritage in the manner of the male ones. They are rarely related to each other, and none of them have ever been reissued in a Penguin Classics. And they are usually not referred to in scholarship in the Robinsonade genre as such either. Still, they were read, some of them, as I will show, in several editions, and they actively engaged in literary and cultural issues of their time. It is therefore a challenge to find a way how to handle this material in a way that makes sense of it, both to feminist scholarship and to comparative literature. Obviously, Robinsonades in general needs comparative literature to be investigated, as the genre, in all its variety, is crossing national and linguistical borders, and it is really a challenge to get a fair overview. But in what sense does gender represent the challenge? Are female Robinsonades something apart? Is there a special quality of female authors who make their stories of shipwrecked boys different from men's heroes? Or do female shipwrecked react and adjust to their island situation differently from men? These questions are related to a general concern raised by feminist scholars in all disciplines and in politics when it comes to gender and the universal. And as always, one runs the risk that by segregating female works, one makes them further marginalized. But at the same time, keeping them apart is the only way of making them visible. As for the differences between male and female Robinsonades, there are several when it comes to the description, both of shipwreck and survival, and they are still not sufficiently examined. They have to do with the cultural and ideological climate of their time, in which a surviving female castaway is definitely a very odd figure. One of the purposes of naming the text female Robinsonades must therefore be to get attention to these differences and open up for reflection upon them. And by the same token, one identifies and makes explicit the implicit maleness of a traditional genre corpus and of the scholar's understanding of the genre in general. The next challenge is what to do with the female Robinsonades once they are marked and put forward, made visible. Is the purpose to make them enter literary history, literary canon? Will that be as individual works or collectively? Not only female Robinsonades belong to what Margaret Cohen called the Great Unread. So do also the majority of all Robinsonades and other writings from the 18th and 19th century. And I must admit there are very few masterpieces among the works I have studied. And in my opinion, we should not study female Robinsonades in the aim of making them canonized. But is it possible to study literary works from the past without implicitly negotiating them into the literary canon? Making visible and reevaluating are closely related, and even while primarily doing canon critique, much feminist scholarship has also pleaded for new or revised canons. In my opinion, this is the real challenge, since there is such a drive to canonization in our field of study, both within literary history, which is structured upon the greatest, most innovative, or most viable works, and with the textual analysis, which for 60 years has been normal science in comparative literature. In an interesting passage on how to handle the great unread, Franco Moretti makes the connection of canon and textual analysis, or close reading. And he says that the trouble with close reading, in all of its incarnation, from the new criticism to deconstruction, is that it necessarily depends on an extremely small canon. This may have become an unconscious and invisible premise by now, but it is an iron law nonetheless. You invest so much in individual texts only if you think that very few of them really matter. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And if you want to look beyond the canon, and of course word literature will do so, it would be absurd if it didn't. Close reading will not do it. The challenge thus is to find other methods than close reading in dealing with what is beyond canon. Moretti launched, as we haven't heard about it, we haven't talked about Moretti, but we will come back to it. Moretti launched the notion of distant reading, and for him it might cover a lot of different reading strategies, from working on titles and paratexts, as he did in his, on secondary sources, as he did in his Atlas on the Novel, and to digital reading tools for text mining large quantities of digitized material, as we just saw examples of. For my material, I realized that the strategy of gendering the genre would have effect only if one could demonstrate a certain quantity of works and their circulation. My method of distant reading was therefore bibliography. And with the help of the ICT developers at my faculty, all my findings are compiled and organized in an online database located at the website at the University of Oslo. I know, bibliography has long had a rather bad reputation, especially among scholars in comparative literature. It has been considered old-fashioned and pedantic, belonging more to archives and philology than to highbrow literary scholarship. This has changed, however, with the last decades of new bibliography and book history, and there is nowadays no doubt that bibliographical research by necessity comprises both hermeneutic and theoretical awareness and belong to the vast field of comparative literature. And I believe that as a digital tool, there are even more arguments for investing in bibliographical research. The potential of digital tools in general is that you can document phenomenon, you can store and share the data, as Biljana also talked about, you can analyze them even in very large quantities, and one can connect, link up to other digital resources. Finally, you can visualize your findings in a more effective way than just presenting papers, as I am doing now. So far, I have profited from all but the last point, that is visualizing. I'll come back to that. When I set out to document female robinsonades, I searched for texts and for information about texts and authors in genre studies, literary history, and history of juvenile fiction, in bibliographies, library catalogues, and antiquarian bookstores. And I have been to several European libraries to look at copies. Many robinsonades were published anonymously, or pseudonymously, and the titles are often so long that they appear in catalogues and bibliographies in abbreviated form, which may vary from one registration to the other. Since this was a popular genre, many works also found in a number of different editions, adaptations and translations, and with different titles. All this made it necessary to be very precise in the identification and documentation of the works and their respective editions and translations. The bibliography is organized as a relational database based on three main entities: author, work, and edition. The work entity is mainly a way to link related editions, but it also contains information of original date and language, genre category, readership, and gender of the protagonists. The author entity is so far very rudimentary, just giving standard information of names, life dates, nationality, and gender. The main part of the work is then found within the edition entity, which follows standards of descriptive bibliography, with detailed information on author description, publishers, format, illustrations, and whether information is based on material inspection of a copy, or on digitized text, or on library catalogues and bibliographical work done by earlier scholars. So, from the period after Defoe's novel until 1900, I have documented, as I said, 91 works with a total of a bit more than 350 editions. And while the author registers come from less than 10 European countries, I have documented editions in more than 20 different languages. My material is still really modest, and there is not enough data to be treated with strong statistical significance. But as a digital tool of research, the bibliography hints at the spread of the genre, temporally and geographically, and it facilitates further research. I will give you some examples of quantitative data at the work level, and then proceed to some more details of editions and circulation. At the work level, I have counted 23 works in English, 31 in German, 25 in French, 6 in Dutch, 2 Russian, 1 Hungarian, 1 Czech, 1 Swedish, and 1 Danish. And since I define female robinsonades as robinsonades written by female authors and or with female protagonists, the database includes both male and female authors. I have so far counted 39 female and 17 male authors, and most of the rest are anonymous. And there are 80 works out of the total of 91 with female protagonists. The material also includes 15 so-called pseudo-robinsonades. That is stories where the Robinson title is metaphorical because there is neither shipwreck nor desert island. In the text I have examined, The Robinsons are stranded in a Russian forest, the Alps, the American prairie, or even in the middle of Le Jardin des Tuileries in Paris. The pseudo-Robinsonades are found especially among the German works from the 18th century and among the French and English children's literature from the 19th century. I have so far counted 41 children's Robinsonades. The first appeared in 1760, that is before Compass adaptation of Robinson Crusoe, and the majority, 29 titles, were written between 1818 and 1870. In compiling this material, I was struck by the quantity and frequency. This means that in this period, in average, there was published a new female Robinsonade for children more often than every second year. And what is just as important, this is not a national trend, as is often treated in the history of children's books, which usually are national. The 29 works mentioned are published originally in these languages, 16 in French, 6 in English, 6 in German, and 1 in Swedish. But counting the editions, that is further editions within the same language and translation to other languages, there are some 180 publications all over Europe, and also in languages such as quite another impression of the cultural impact within juvenile fiction of the 19th century. There are a few more numbers from the work level. There is a spread in time, and you can see that there is a cumulative effect of editions. This also is visible for the readership in time, where there are steadily more works written for children throughout the 19th century. More interesting than general numbers at the work level, however, are the more detailed information of language and circulation. About the works translated from English, I have found 5 in German, 3 in French, 2 in Dutch, 1 Swedish, and what's in the parentheses is the editions in total. But I found no translation from English to Russian, Italian, or Danish. And one of the examples of a really successful circulated Robinsonade is the children's Robinsonade of Anne Fraser Tytler, called Lila or the Island. From French, there are several Robinsonades translated to German and English, but also to Russian and more modest to Italian, Spanish, Danish and Swedish. And Daubenton, Série dans le désert, that is a Robinsonade, a sentimental novel, as a Robinsonade from the late 18th century, with an enormous quantity of French editions, but also a wide range of translations. It is outnumbered by French editions, by a children's Robinsonades from 1818, and by editions from exactly the one where the small Robinson is stranded in Le Jardin des Tuileries. When it comes to German originals, however, the situation is quite different. I have so far found only one book, and that is Höller's continuation of Kampe, which has been translated at all, and only to Dutch and Scandinavian languages. While German works dominate the genre during the 18th century, there seems to be no translations to other languages, and I find this surprising, and the lack of data begs for further inquiries. To engage in such inquiries, one needs a wide variety of methods, not only bibliography, but sociological analysis, translation studies, and both distant reading and close reading. And I'm quite convinced that we shall not leave close reading altogether by going into digital tools, but use bifocal lenses and switch between close and distant reading. If close reading leads up to a question, distant reading might help to find an answer or more specified questions, and vice versa. As for the exception mentioned here on that slide, the Robinson Brésilien, that is one of the works that is not originally presented as a Robinsonade, but which gets into the genre by the translation, because the translated title refers to Robinson. Another slide on circulation. Because there are few works with a very particular itinerary, especially among the juvenile fiction. And I thought I would perhaps I have the time for that? If it works? I have 5 minutes. Oh, but it is good. It should connect to my database. Well, for Le Petit Robinson de Paris, that is the one who is stranded in the Jardin des Tuileries. That is the book with the really the widest span geographically and linguistically. It cannot run now. I'll come back to it.
Can you go straight maybe direct to the browser?
Yes, but I can do that. Usually I can do it from the PowerPoint, but I'll do that afterwards. It is. There are copies or translations of this book, all from the United States to all corners of Europe and also in Arab. And Karshulkova, with the Russian Robinson in the Russian forest, has an itinerary where it's obvious that it goes from Russian via French to English. And Melin Øyjungfrun is even more complicated because that is a book that was written in Swedish in and published in 1832. But at a certain moment I read a French edition that resembled really very much from 1896. And I found out that that was an expanded translation but presented as a translation from Russian. And then later I found the Russian link between the two editions. That sort of question offers problems to my database because I had thought about that there will be co-authored Robinsonades when I set out to search for them. So it's possible to link two different authors to the same work. But it's possible to link the editions only to one work. And I keep asking myself the question, if the French translation of Elena Robinson, which is called La Petite Robinsonette in French, if that is a translation both of the Russian version and the Swedish, or if I should just make the itinerary in more etaps like that. Especially with these last examples, I would have liked to have used more visualizing tools to present them. And in the future, the developers has assured me, there will be maps on the database so that all spread and networks and combination of works should be visualized immediately. And it should be possible to identify itineraries when it can be traced bibliographically. Apart from documentation and analyzing. Apart from documentation and analyzing, digital tools also have the advantages of making connections in an easy way. With my material, it is of course interesting to link up to the Women's Rights database that Biljana talked of to get more information on the authorship. For instance, to see the place of a Robinsonade within a female author's literary career. Was it the first step to make a living by the pen, as it has been argued? Or are they already established as authors when they start writing Robinsonades? And also for the reception of the work. Did translations of Robinsonade follow the tracks of reception of earlier works by the author, or are there politics by publishing houses that makes work circulate? Connections to resources on travel literature, children's literature, cultural education, etc. would also be very relevant, and as this might help to situate my material in a wider context to which it belongs. And links to online texts are obvious, as it should be possible to do distant close reading on several texts to compare works within the genre or even between translations of the same work in different languages or at different periods. So far, I have only read about the tools of stylometrics, which you were talking about, and also topic modeling, but I hope to be able to test these tools also on my Robinsonade material. It is evident that my bibliography does not give a complete picture of the field of female Robinsonades. There must be more works out there that I have so far not discovered, and editions of documented works in other languages, Spanish, Portuguese, and Slav. But the first step was making this bibliography. And it is definitely a tool to do more research by myself, but also by others. I would therefore be very much, I would also therefore appreciate very much suggestions of other sources, and if people would communicate with me on this too. Thank you for your attention.